All right. I am so glad that we are able to have this session and so glad that Betsy has joined us for this. Betsy, we ask every year if she's available in January, and this is a year she is, and I'm so delighted. So thank you so much. Betsy is a professor here at Hamline, works with me on that campus, and has been in ESL a long time and literally wrote the book on teaching adult ESL. She has been one of my main mentors throughout my career. So one thing you might not know, depending on how long you've been in adult ed, is that starting back in 1994, we had this Adult ESL Institute that Betsy started and ran for years and years. And then at one point, we decided to merge it with another event to focus on reading and writing and ESL. And so that this event that you're at today goes back to 1994 in its kind of founding beginnings there back in the day. And Betsy was the person who made that happen. Another thing to know is that Betsy wrote the original grant to begin Atlas. So she is our founding mother, and we are so, so grateful that she had the vision that would become Atlas and this system of professional development that we have in Minnesota. So besides being an expert on how adults acquire language, she also is an expert on how professional development really can happen in a state at that level. And we're so proud. Thank you so much, Betsy, for joining us and for being here and for sharing your expertise this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patsy, for that very warm welcome. I've been working with Patsy since the early 2000s, and she came on board to work in our program as an adjunct. We've been collaborating and coordinating for years, and she started off co-leading Atlas with Kim Johnson and co-founding the activities, the programming, and then Patsy joined us, which was such a thrill. I'm so happy to be here today. This topic is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I've been talking to others a lot about this, and it's really applicable to the world of ESL, which, as you all know, that is my primary background. But I have been talking, speaking, encouraging teachers who teach any subject area to apply some of the practices that we're going to think about today. So we'll get into our objectives here, which are that we're going to think about identifying learner writing needs, and you'll see why are we talking about writing today as a focal point, but then also thinking about how to integrate that oral language to really draw on oral language that learners bring to the classroom, as well as reading, listening, critical thinking, how all of that comes together, and see how we can use what's called the teaching and learning cycle to accomplish that. And then we'll think about a variety of activities and scaffolds that we can use for each stage of the teaching and learning cycle. So our agenda will be, first of all, what are learners writing about in their lives? How do they need to use writing, whether it's in work, for education, in their personal lives? And then make this case for why is it so important to integrate all of the skills, then using that teaching and learning cycle. And I also just want to know that at that point, what are those connections to the CCR shifts? We'll look at a sample lesson and do some reflection in a breakout room, and then have a break, and then look at a couple of other lessons and have some time for you to think about applications for your settings in a second breakout room. But first of all, I want to know who's here. So I have a poll that Patsy's going to pull up for us.
Oh my goodness, Betsy, I am having
Oh,
trouble with that poll. So what I
oh,
think we
shoot.
might do
Just put
is
in the
just let
chat.
people put in the chat. Yeah, I
Oh, no
apologize.
problem. No
But
problem.
if
So,
people can
you know
put in
what?
the chat, and those questions would be like,
Yeah,
what level are you teaching?
right.
What program you're in? What else, Bets?
So we had, are you teaching like HSC, GED type courses, working with those for whom English is their primary language, or ESL? Are you teaching a career pathways class? Also, we were asking about whether you teach primarily online, face-to-face, or HiFlex now. And so I'm just going to take a quick look at some of the responses that are coming in. Let's see, we have, and I was just noticing some of our other messaging. So we do have GED, a lot of GED, ESL, HSE reading, ESL. So it looks like kind of a mix of ESL and GED, ABE. Um, multi-ability ESL in person. So I think all of us would agree that most every class we teach will be quite multi-level, right? And you're going to see why the teaching and learning cycle is so appropriate because it's very flexible and very much guided by what learners' needs might be, and that within one classroom you could have a variety of different, what we're going to see are called mentor texts as a bridge to writing, and those can be different. Oh, here, Patsy, you have the prompts here. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. So I think we have a nice blend, both ESL and ABE or HSE instructors. I didn't really see career pathways. I may have just missed it, but all right, we have some people in supervision roles. So I hope you'll find some takeaways and things that you can share with colleagues in your setting. So thank you, everybody. I'll keep looking at those as we're working our way through this morning. So first of all, again, let's use the chat. And I want you to think about what kinds of writing are the learners in your classes engaged in, both inside and outside of the class. So let's just throw those ideas in the chat. Are they writing, is it for more like community purposes, like functional text, like writing emails to their kids' schools, or are they in a GED program and they're working on essays? Okay, the GED essay sentences paired. Okay, great. Texting and social media, absolutely. Okay, different types of essays, life skills, functional texts, narratives. Okay, great, good. Work related. Okay, college writing. Absolutely. Great. All right. I think your list is quite similar as you continue putting in the chat, but here are some categories or ideas. For example, at the workplace, I think we've seen this: email, reports, charts, tables, applications, resumes, cover letters, all those sorts of things, right? So I think you might see that in their lives, but also things that we might work on in a variety of class settings. Academic, it might be notes, essays, reports, research papers, and tests, right? Right, where there might be an essay portion to a test. And then finally, in the community, things like text messages, emails, notes to teachers, landlords, others, different forms. We have like Canvas discussions here, text evidence, writing, narratives. Okay, wonderful. I think your lists that I'm seeing in your chat, I see some parallels to the list that I have here. Okay, so let's think about then. Oops, my clicker, there we go. One of the reasons we're talking about writing, why writing is a centerpiece today. Well, one thing we know from research is that low literacy skills do equate with lower paying jobs. And so I think that we often forget about including meaningful writing instruction unless if we're teaching a GED class and we're preparing people for the GED test, we're obviously really working on writing or really doing English language arts work. Those of you teaching ESL, though, you might notice that a lot of times the curricula don't necessarily include a lot of work on writing. And in fact, Fernandez et al. Have a great study that you've maybe read. It was in the COAID journal from 2017, which found that in their survey of, it was close to 300 teachers across the country, most of what they did with regard to writing in their ESL classes was very short functional writing tasks, mostly narrative, kind of sentence level. And then that mirrored what Kim Johnson and I had found in our study back in 2010. Things have changed a lot, granted, absolutely, but we really do need to oftentimes sort of beef it up when it comes to writing because we know those skills are so important. And Kim and I also in our study found that college faculty at community college, we surveyed people at community college level, a lot of technical colleges, they had very high expectations with regard to writing and what learners were expected to do. And even somewhere around 30% of teachers in that setting expected learners to be able to do write research papers. Okay, so with that, there's a quote here that I just love. It's from Tony Hillerman, who's the author of the Navajo Tribal Police Mystery Series, if anybody knows those. And just kind of look at some of these key ideas here. To become a good writer, one must read abundantly and critically. And that reading critically from this standpoint involves examining the language choices authors make to get the job done. In other words, to communicate effectively in specific ways with particular audience. Okay, so some key words there again. I want to like reading critically. Language choices are really important for particular audiences. And I love this quote because it really ties into the teaching learning cycle that we're going to talk about. There's different skills. Here we talked about connections to reading, but we also want to think about those connections to oral language. We know that learners oftentimes have they might have quite proficient social language, what Cummins called social language versus more academic language or academic discourse. So sometimes that social language is the strength that they bring. Or D talks about primary and secondary discourses. So our primary discourses are what we do kind of in our home life. But then we have these secondary or more specialized discourses out in the world, whether that's for different jobs, whether that's at school, et cetera, et cetera. Also, Gibbons, if you know the work of Gibbons, and she's done most of her work in K-12 ed, but it's just so relevant to our work. You know, she's like, even so, like learners need to engage in what she calls intellectual quality in the classroom. So learners, they bring that intellectual quality, they have the ideas, but it's our job to really have learners participate with deep inquiry or higher order thinking tasks at all levels of instruction. And it's a sort of a way to help learners make that thinking that they have visible. Okay, and so how do we do that? Well, so the answer, one answer, there's many, but and so we really want to take advantage of the learner's strengths. Talk is often a learner's strength, and so then we want to leverage that. Okay, so how can we do that? And we're going to see that the teaching learning cycle is a wonderful way to do this. And the teaching learning cycle actually, it came out of Australia quite a long time ago. It was very prominent and prevalent in English language instruction, ELA, like in English language arts in the secondary settings. And it's kind of expanded to other contexts and for different purposes. But you're going to see many things that are very familiar. First of all, why don't you just raise your hand or wave if you've heard of the teaching learning cycle before? Let's see, I got to look at the list of participants to see your waves and whatnot, right? Okay. A few people I see but not too many, right? And when I was doing the dry run with Christy and Patsy, and Christy said she was trained as a high school English teacher, she really hadn't heard about it either. And you're not alone. A lot of people haven't heard about this. And it has familiar stages, and you're going to see very familiar tasks, which is good. So I'm leveraging what you already bring to the table to think about how you can apply this in this very systematic way of approaching writing instruction. So building the field is starting off with what we've often about as like schema building, building up learners' background knowledge, building some content knowledge about the topic before we delve into our lesson, then using model or mentor texts. I should have added mentors, model/mentor texts. We're going to use those a lot. We're going to see how we provide a text and we do reading. We build in reading instruction within this cycle. With the model mentor text, we really work with the text to help learners read for meaning. Then we move on to deconstructing the text, which is both finding, what are the structures of the text, what does a cause effect essay typically look like, or what are the different moves within an argument. But it's also deconstructing it in terms of language features. And then joint construction is constructing a text that kind of mirrors our mentor text, but doing it as a class collectively. And then finally, moving to individual instruction. Okay. So here someone said this feels familiar to elementary writing instruction. So maybe, yeah, it could very well be that there's that focus, this cycle that we can, that we're drawing from. So one of the ways I would also want to note that then this really is a great, very systematic way to both integrate all sorts of language skills, okay, language modalities, language skills, and it's a way to build content knowledge through the first stages of your lesson where you're building the field, and your mentor text can be content rich and really have learners read for meaning. You deconstruct the text so that learners are able to manage text complexity. And then as you're doing joint construction, you're going to see how you can have students use evidence in constructing their new texts that they do, both as a group and individually. Okay? All right. Just a little background, just so you know, and as you do more reading, if you're interested, this is grounded in what's called genre-based pedagogy and systemic functional linguistics. In other words, we think of texts as having these different genres, for example, scientific reports, argumentative essays, or persuasive texts, or literary, everyday narratives, biographies, letters, news articles, right? This is probably familiar ground. I'm just giving a label to that. And that with that, okay, with that, we know that texts have a social purpose. This is really important to think about. And it's a more functional view of reading and writing. So each genre serves a specific purpose for informing people or persuading people or entertaining people. They tend to be kind of have a stage-based structure. So for example, like a science report will have an introduction and then methods and then results. Or a narrative has sort of the orientation or introduction, some sort of complication or hook, right? And then resolution. It also has contextual links. That's sort of the cultural context. In other words, we're going to use different registers, levels of formality, different modalities. We're also going to consider our tone. Again, and all of that is based on the cultural context. And then finally, we have the linguistic realization, the specific grammar or word choices that realize these different social purposes, okay? So you'll see then the idea with the teaching learning cycle is that the steps allow us to sort of unveil or reveal those different elements of purpose, structure, linguistic feature, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now I had something funny happen there we go. All right, so, and why is this so effective with adults? Well, we can really build relevance through the mentor texts we choose, through the contents we choose. There's lots of scaffolding. We also have been talking about process-oriented writing forever, right? For decades and decades, and the teaching learning cycle is lovely because it really is that process-oriented approach. It's recursive, it's a cycle. You can circle back to different stages, and it's very active. Okay, so that's my little background. I wanted to give you a little background and ground the work that we're doing before we move to our sample lessons. So the first one we're going to take a look at is on writing biographies. Now, I want to move something off my screen here. Sorry, I want to be able to see my notes a little better. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is that I know that you teach at different levels and you're teaching to different levels of text complexity, different types of text. Some of you might be beginning level ESL and you're working on more functional, everyday community-based writing tasks. Some of you are having learners write argumentative essays. So what I want to highlight is that in a 2-hour workshop, it would be very hard for me to have you work with these really long texts to demonstrate the principles. So I want you to trust me. Like I've chosen very short mentor texts, but they all demonstrate the steps and the stages that are highly transferable regardless of what you're teaching or who you're teaching. Okay, so just that's something I really want you to be thinking about. So as we're working our way through some activities, think, okay, how could I use that in my context where we're working on, developing an argument, or we're working on science reports, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, all right. So as I said, our first one is on biographies, and the final writing task will be to write a short biography about a famous person. Also, you'll note that I'm saying, or it could be a family member or someone in your community, because you'll see the theme is civil rights for this sample, and the final tasks ask you to write about somebody who's had some connection to the civil rights, and that could be a family member. Because after all, a biography, it doesn't have to be about a famous person. It could be about a person that's of note to you, and you're still working on that text type or that working on a biography. All right. You'll also note that in my samples, I'm not really providing a level necessarily, because the idea with this cycle is that it's highly variable depending on the text that you choose, your mentor text that you choose, the text type. And then with that text type, you're going to reveal the language features that would then be level appropriate. Okay, so I'll kind of leave it up to you when you do a breakout session in a bit here. You're going to have a chance to debrief this and debrief the learning, the teaching and learning cycle among yourselves, and kind of see if you agree that oh wow, yeah, this is really okay. So I didn't want to prescribe that this is a level, this is a lesson for level 1 or level 2 or level 3. Okay. I do provide possible context. But to build the field, we're going to start with, this is a bit twist. I mean, instead of KWL, calling it a KCL. So what do you know about Rosa Parks? And what's something you're curious about? What would you like to learn about Rosa Parks? And let's just take 1 second. Why don't we just do the K? What do you know about Rosa Parks? You can go ahead in the chat and we'll do the K together. Okay, let's see. Okay, right. She refused to sit at the back of the bus. Civil rights movement related to the boycott. She was okay, an activist, right? Great. She was brave. Okay, so you can keep going. And so this, we give learners time. And I personally love to have learners do these with a small group at a table. Maybe then you build a whole class one on the screen. What's something you're curious about? Okay, right. What? Okay. Was she? Yeah, yeah. What was her later life like? What was something about her immediate family? Great, great. Okay, okay. Now, we're going to look at a very short text, and so we may not find answers to all of these questions, but I think we might find some. So now take a look. See if you take a moment. I'm going to let you. This is in your. Okay, let me. You can share the link to the participant folder multiple times, Patsy and Christy. But in the participant folder, I do have our mentor texts that I'll be working with on the screen here if you want to see those, but I'll show this one here on the screen. Okay, so I think for this one, you're fine just looking on the screen. But just take a moment, skim through this. Anything that you guessed affirmed, anything that you were curious about addressed. I'll just give you a second to do that. Okay. I had to see a thumbs up. Yeah. That's a great way to affirm. Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah. So, all right. I saw a lot of your predictions, I think, square with what we see in the reading, right? Okay, good, good. Now, but we're gonna work with the text, and I'm gonna share a graphic organizer with you in just a moment, okay? But rather, while you're looking at the text, okay, while you're looking at the text, what might be something you could share about her early years? So, what's something about her early years? Just even a word or a short phrase you might record about her early years. Anybody? Lived on a farm. Okay, nice. Born in 1913. Okay. How about anything about her activities? Activities. She was a seamstress, sewing. Okay. NAACP. She went to school. Great. And what I love is you're giving these really short phrases because now I'll show you the graphic organizer I created for this one. It's inviting learners just to put in notes, like key ideas. So, 2 to 3 key ideas, early years, activism, and then professional life. Yeah, yeah, I think maybe I misspoke when I asked you to record. Anyway, so we're going to scaffold for understanding, and the scaffold itself provides them with kind of a template of how they might plan their own biography later on. Okay, can be thinking about that. Also, this could be turned into a speaking activity. One learner could have the graphic organizer, and the other learner could do a read aloud while their partner records what they hear. Okay, so be thinking about that. Again, what other language modalities or skills could we draw into this lesson? Okay, so then next, we go back to our KWL. Oh, KCL, I didn't change the C here, so sorry. But what did you learn? What's something new that you learned from the text that you hadn't predicted? Or what were you curious about that was addressed in the reading? Okay, all right. So thank you. Yes, Patsy, it's sample lesson 1 and the mentor text is on the bottom. Okay, all right. So we've been working with the text now for meaning. We're really like, what is it about? What did we learn? What are we learning about Rosa Parks? And we're learning for meaning. Now we're going to start to deconstruct the text. So we had build the field. It's our first step, or in the cycle. We're going, you worked with the mentor text and you really worked with it for meaning. Now we're going to try to deconstruct the text a bit. Now, before I show you my marked up text, I want to invite you to just share what are some words that show you we're talking about the past? What are some words that show you we're talking about the past? See what words. So you can go ahead and we'll use the chat for this. Okay, was, led, right? Some dates in the past, right? Very nice. Okay, all right. Okay, now what are some phrases that words or phrases that show different times or time frames? Can you think, like, for example, in 1913, right? Later, 12 years, first years of our lives, right? Good, good. All right, nice, very nice. So here's what a marked up text might look like. So when you've invited learners to do this work, first they could highlight the verbs and then draw attention. Well, what verb tense do you see? Simple past. What's going on with was born? Like kind of highlight and unpack. So what about had been? So maybe doing a little mini lesson on the past perfect versus the simple past and what that denotes and how it shows chronology. So now we're looking at those linguistic features of the text. Now and then I invite the learners to underline words and phrases that show time. Okay, so in 1913, the first years, like you said. How about which show a period of time? Well, from 1943 until 1956, right? Or in the early years. So again, we're going to really take time to unpack some of the linguistic features that go with this text type, right? All right. Next, we're going to then do some joint construction. So for that, we'll take a look at another important figure in the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr., and provide the class with a timeline like this. Now, again, an addition that you could make to this is to have two versions, one with half the dates missing, okay, and have learners, first of all, do an information gap activity which I'll just quick definition where one student has a certain amount of information, the other student has different information, and they are required to communicate to complete their task. So this could be created through an infogap activity with learners where I have 1929, but I don't have what happened. And then Patsy has 1953, but she doesn't have what happened and I do. So we have to have a conversation to build our timeline. That would be a possible addition to this, okay? But working with a timeline, we're going to now do some joint construction as a group. So for example, using the timeline, we're going to write a short biography of Martin Luther King Jr. So remember, we have to use what tense? The simple past. And then this is up to you. The next stage, this is where you vary the levels, right? You say at least two time phrases, and you have to use from, to, or until, okay? You could also provide students with some sentence frames, again, depending on their level, okay? So again, if you look back at we have our timeline here, all right? And so we might say, he served as president of the SCLC from, let's see, do I have that information here? I'm sorry. He became president until he died. I think it's until he died. Yeah. So from 1957 until 1968. Okay. So that's our joint construction. So you're going to see that joint construction is like co-creating as a class, co-creating a text that mirrors our mentor text, highly scaffolded, and it's very collaborative, done as a group, but you can always have points where the learners like turn and talk, work on it together, and then contribute to the whole class. So there's lots of interaction. Finally, we'll come to our individual construction, okay? So, individual construction tasks are like kind of our typical, what we might see as our typical writing tasks that we see. And now, but we've made our way here through these different stages. So the individual construction is that the learners identify an important figure central to the civil rights movement that they want to learn about. They can do any variety of ways, maybe web research, the library. If they're going to maybe write about a person they know well, it might be an interview, someone important to them. And then they're going to write their biography using all of the different frames that we've seen, scaffolds that we've seen, mirroring the model. But then finally, what's also really important is that leaving time then for some sort of feedback from a peer. In this case, it may be a partner could read the biography that the student constructs, and they complete, for example, a timeline graphic organizer, or they complete a graphic organizer like we used for Rosa Parks as they read their partner's work. All right. So, all right, now in a moment here, you're going to go into breakout rooms to reflect a bit on this first sample. But I'd love to pause to see if you have any questions or want some clarification about any of the stages and steps that we've seen so far. And you can either put those in the chat or raise your hand, and maybe Patsy can be watching for whose hands are up, because that'll be a little trickier for me to see both the chat.
Yeah.
But
Anthony's asking, how
and
long do you take
yeah,
for each step?
yeah. So Anthony, great question. This could be, frankly, the cycle could be something that happens over a couple of days or a few lessons, potentially, depending on the complexity of the text that you're using. Also, each stage, I think so many times we teach for like 2 hour blocks in adult education. It's pretty typical, right? It's very unusual that we have just a 1 hour class. So the again, don't feel like you have to rush this into that class. If you were doing something short, like constructing an email to a teacher, and you had a 2 hour lesson, you could probably work your way through those stages in a 2 hour lesson. But if you were working on, say, writing an argumentative essay, and you're going to work through those stages over time, that might be the basis of a week-long unit. And that's why I hesitated. So I'm going to tell this now. I shared with Patsy before. I did not construct sample lesson plans that are really prescriptive, like it's for this level and it's these standards. What I'm sharing in my folder are examples of the 5 stages for 3 different types of texts, inviting you to use those and kind of pull those into your own lesson planning, and using what other lesson planning formats you use, or building it into a curriculum that incorporates all sorts of language. There's another, let's see. You said for low level, I can see this taking up to a week. Absolutely. I mean, it really depends on, so what would you recommend for latecomers? Great question. Well, you could have a volunteer catch them up. The thing that's so nice, so Nick, is that it's very iterative, and so you kind of go back to the text multiple times, and I think it actually affords an opportunity for people to get caught up. Let's say you've been doing a lot of work on, building the field, and you're working with the mentor text, but then the next day when you start doing the kind of joint construction, you're going to revisit the text. Okay. Yeah. So I forgot to put model/mentor for that stage, Bertie. We're thinking about the kind of reading the text, like we have the mentor text. This is kind of our model, the mentor. And we're going to work with the mentor text at that stage for meaning. So that's why we might read and fill in a graphic organizer. We might read and answer text-dependent questions. We might read and fill in. We're going to see other examples of that actually today, okay? Whereas text deconstruction is where we try to look at the language features. And that's both how is the text organized and what are the linguistic moves or features of that particular genre, whether it's verb tenses, whether it's time phrases, whether it's connectors, transitions, et cetera, okay? I hope that answers those questions. All right. Those are great questions. I think really important. I hope I didn't miss anything here. I do apologize if Christy, was there anything else that I didn't?
There's one
we
more.
got some nice.
Yeah, one more question. What distinguishes modeling the text from deconstructing it?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what it's just. So modeling is more that stage of using the mentor text and really reading it for meaning. and being exposed to this mentor or model. And then the deconstructing is where you really do like the highlighting. We're going to see lots of examples, different examples today. Does that answer your question, Bertie? You want to do I hope. Okay. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now in breakout rooms, again, you have the sample, so you can kind of be reminded of the stages. You have the sample in your folder. I want you to find the sample lesson, writing a biography, and then think about this question. How did the teaching and learning cycle provide bridges between speaking, reading, writing, and also thinking? Okay, really thinking about the topic. And then what was an inspiration you drew for your own practice? Okay, what was an inspiration for you? Maybe your inspiration was that I'm not going to change everything I do, but I love this idea of doing more text deconstruction. Okay. Maybe that's your inspiration. Yeah. So thank you for putting that. Yeah. And if people want to, we can, okay. So we're going to do 10 minutes total. So in that time, be sure to introduce yourselves to one another, get to know your group. You're going to be with that same group at the end of the morning during the application activity. All right, so Patsy and Christy, I think we're ready to
Yeah.
place people in breakout rooms for 10 minutes.
Sounds good. You are already assigned. You should be able to go directly there. If you have any trouble, just hang out a second and Christy and I will help you out. The questions that Betsy is asking you to talk about are in the chat. And then here's that participant folder one more time. And again, this is sample lesson 1. All right, off you go. If you joined after I set up the groups, it'll just take us a minute to assign you. So give us just one moment. Otherwise, please go ahead and feel free to uh, obviously unmute and show your cameras.
I love that. I'm looking at the comments here. And it's so fun to see Laura here and so many people I know.
So Elizabeth, I didn't assign you because you're a co-host. Do you want to be in a group?
Sorry, yes, I was wondering where I should go.
Yeah,
Um,
just
I'll
know
just,
Elizabeth, thank you
it
for
goes
being here.
automatically. But
yeah,
yes, you would like to be in a group?
yes,
Okay.
wherever you want to put me.
All right, I'll put you in a group that has a little more space. And then
Hi,
Britt, I see
Rob.
you. Give me 1 second. Let me just find a group that has fewer people in it. I mean, they're all awesome, so you really can't go wrong. Let's go. All right, Britt, I'll put you in group 7. Marilyn, let's see. I had you in 14. All right, I'm going to move you to 13 and then I'll move you right back. All right, don't be alarmed.
Patsy, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to get more water.
Yeah, no problem.
Try to find oh, here.
All right, Rob, did you want to
I'm
go to a
so
group?
Yeah, and I
I'm
wanted
so
to say
glad
hi to
you
Rob.
Oh,
Oh,
hey,
sorry,
Rob.
go ahead, Christy. Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
I was just gonna say I'm so glad that you handled the breakout rooms, Patsy.
They can be a little tricky. I'm going to stop the recording, which I should have done already. Sorry. Recording.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Betsy.
Good to
Good
see
to
you.
see you.
You too.
Something that came up in our group, one of my colleagues said that they really appreciated your mention of the information gap activity. And
Mm.
we were noting how high leverage that is as an activity because it incorporates all the skills. So when we can weave that in, very high leverage for our time.
Awesome. Thank you for pointing that one out. And the idea that you've got these familiar activities that you might be using all the time, but how do we weave them? And I love that the cycle allows you to kind of weave them together and then make sure you're incorporating all of the different skill areas. Benjamin, you had your hand up.
One thing we were talking about in our group was how these writing projects might transfer to non-writing classes. Like, for example, there could be a collaboration between doing this project in the writing class and then maybe doing the timeline in the math class.
Absolutely. 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 Thank you. Right. And also then think about, yeah, whether it's ELA, social studies work that you might be doing in the GED. I'm also seeing we've got other, our group, we agreed on introducing this in lower levels. You like the idea of interviewing each other and filling in the gaps to construct the new writing text. Absolutely, wonderful idea. Punching above your weight, like you said, Patsy. Laura joined, let's see. I'm seeing. Yeah, right. Like it's a really great way to break down an intimidating assignment, right? So I really think of the teaching learning cycle as like a big scaffold in and of itself. The cycle itself is a big scaffold because it breaks it down, brings us, like gives students the intermediate steps to getting where they have to go. And then, so you could do it for cover letters. Somebody earlier said you could do this for resume writing, right? Exactly. So the first two samples we're looking at are like writing the first one we saw was writing a biography. The next one's going to be writing a comparative essay. And then I'm going to show how to apply this to a very functional task of writing an email. And that's more like some of the functional tasks like crafting a resume, right? Thank you so much. So now I'm going to reshare my slides. I don't know if I missed any hands up. I apologize if I did. I think Christy and Patsy will let me know if I did. Are we good? All right.
Yeah, there's some good
Okay.
comments, but I think you should go ahead.
Did I? Okay. So let's just think now, what did we see and I think this mirrors a lot of what you talked about. So to build the field, we activated prior knowledge using the curious, learned, the know, curious about, learn chart, really connecting that background knowledge then to the text by going, circling back and what did I learn? And then remember also you would read and fill in a simple graphic organizer of early years, activism, etc. To model the text or the mentor text, we worked with Rosa Parks' text as a model to read. Well, that's right there. That's like reading and filling in the graphic organizer. Like you're really unpacking it for its meaning. And then deconstructing by highlighting the verbs, underlining the time expressions. Then the class generated a biography of Martin Luther King with a timeline and sentence frames. And then finally, we land with our writing about a familiar person and having students present that to others, read, and then fill in some kind of a graphic organizer. All right, so we're right on time. We have a time now we're going to take a 15-minute coffee, tea, or muffin break, whatever you are so inclined to do during this time. So we're going to come back exactly in 15 minutes. It'll be kind of an odd time. It'll be at 10:57, right, Patsy?
That sounds right. We could even find a timer for this screen if that's helpful. And I'm so sad we don't have donuts for you because if we were in person we would, but you'll have to just manage without. And we'll see you in 15 minutes. I'll stop the recording.
All right.
And welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, everybody.
Nothing happened.
Thank you so much for your understanding. So we're going to do a quick checking task as we reconnect after the break. So we have the idea of building the field. So build the field, work with a mentor text for meaning, deconstruct the text to explore the language of text type, joint construction, and independent or individual construction. Okay, I'm sorry, I've used that word synonymously, independent or individual. I used both of those terms at different points, but meaning the same thing. So I'm going to have you look at a task, an activity type. Which stage would that be? Put the number in the chat. So this is an example. A teacher read aloud. The teacher models fluent and active reading behaviors, reading aloud a text or an excerpt from the text, stopping to model or have students participate in summarizing what they read, making predictions, responding to text-dependent questions, highlighting effective or interesting language used, or otherwise reflecting on the text. Okay, and this could have a couple possible answers. It's not meant to be a trick question, but it really could. It could be yes. So it could be 2 and 3 actually, right? Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. So I purposely decided to include that one to show you some of the flexibility. You could sort of think of it as you're at first you're reading and you're doing the summarizing and predicting, and that's more the focus on meaning, but then you're moving into deconstruction by having them highlight different language use, text features. Okay. Some are going to be more clear-cut, but great. Okay, how about class-generated paragraph? Provide input or data and sentence frames to write a paragraph that mirrors the mentor text? What would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Absolutely. Great job. So now it would be 4 and not 5 because it's the class together is generating, and that's the joint construction. Okay? All right. Nice. How about paragraph or essay frame? Provide the students with a paragraph or essay frame. I meant to say that mirrors the mentor text. They write their own paragraph or essay, share with a partner for feedback. You see? So that's clearly 5, right? Nice. How about this one? Lineups with strongly agree at one end, strongly disagree at the other end. Make a statement of the unit topic and have learners stand on a continuum from strongly agree to strongly disagree, share their thinking with a shoulder partner. If you're working online, you could do this in the breakout room with a continuum on a Google Doc and have them put an X about where they stand and discuss with the group. Okay, so, all right, so some different, are we working with the text yet? I mean, that's a clue here. Are we working with the text yet, or are we just sort of building background knowledge? No text. So with that, I would say it's more 1. It's more something you would do to build the field. Now, if you wanted to use this later on in the lesson, sure, you could then maybe take a statement from the text. Okay, but this one is kind of an idea of how to lead into it. You're going to see that I have a handout. I've created a handout for you with several examples of the sorts of things you could do at the different stages. And I say could do because, again, there is some flexibility. And you'll have a chance to take a look at that when you go into your breakout room at the end for application. How about this one? So again, we're thinking, okay, jigsaw. Form 3 or 4 expert groups. Each group discusses a different text using a note-taking tool to capture points from the reading. One person from each expert group shares the information they have in their notes with experts. They use the same note-taking to capture what they've reported and shared. Okay, I see lots of 2s, and that's what it's like really working with the mentor text, like really working with it for meaning. And Jigsaw is a great way to do that. I'm sure that's a very familiar activity. So these are just samples. It was a little check-in, a little regroup activity to get us thinking about like what sorts of things could we do at the different stages. All right. So the next, so I think I would probably place the jigsaw with really the working with the text for meaning, primarily. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into our second sample. Okay. And the final writing task would be to write a comparative essay comparing elementary school in your home country or to the system in the U.S. So I did design this one specifically for ESL in mind, but you could just switch this to write a short comparative essay comparing elementary education in the US and another country around the world. So this does not have to be at all for an English language class, for an ESL class. But I wanted to be true to what I had developed it for originally. So, but I hope you're comfortable with that, okay? So we're gonna start off. To build the field, we're going to start off with what do you notice, what do you wonder activity, okay? So as I show you images, we're going to use the chat, and of course, if we were teaching face-to-face, we would work in groups, students could turn and talk, you could open mics, but for our purposes today with such a large audience, let's just do some answers in the chat. So what do you notice, what do you wonder? Here are some images of schools we're going to look at education in general, not just elementary ed for starters, but schools in general. I spent some time working with teachers in Vietnam, and these are some classes I visited. What do you notice about the classes? Okay. Uniforms, right? What else? It's kind of cramped, kind of crowded, right? Right? The shared tables. Right? In fact, yeah, the desks were actually nailed to the floor, so there wasn't a lot of flexibility, right? Okay, a lot of writing, note-taking, okay. It seems to be teacher-focused, but the students are very attentive, aren't they? Exactly, right? Right? She had great technology, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, but students themselves aren't. Yeah, and this was, this actually was my trip maybe in the like 2012, maybe today learners would have more tech, but I don't know. No, when I was there again in 2023, yeah, the teachers were using a lot of technology and using devices at the workshops with me, but not the learners that I saw in classes. So good observations. What do you wonder? Yeah, you see sentence frames on the screen. Nice. Great, Leah. What do you wonder? Just one or two things. Oh, what grade or age is this? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Uh-huh. Great. Okay. Good. Good. All right. How about in Guatemala? What do you notice? Great questions here. Lots of smiles. Okay. Happy kids, right? They're sitting around tables. Okay. All right. Nice. Nice. Great. They're doing some kind of art. Could it be? Yeah. And then so we're not going to do notice and wonder for every single picture. I'm just going to scan through a few more here. We have Nigeria. What's a key noticing here? Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. All right. I think this is actually, I don't think it's all boys, but I think this young woman here and like right in the front, you see sort of like a jumper with a collar. I feel like that's a young woman. So I think it might be co-ed. How about we're going to take a look at Indonesia? I was intrigued by the picture on the left. What do you notice? What do you think they're doing? It's kind of sewing, some kind of a sewing project, right? Interesting, huh? Okay, so with each of these photos, we take a look at like, what do we notice? What do we wonder? Okay, what do we notice? What do we wonder? Okay, all right. So working with those photos, okay, say now you have this whole set of photos, and let's just think about some things we could do with those photos. These could be little, you could make them into little flashcards, or you could have them in a shared Google Doc, and people can move them around, manipulate them. So, for example, what if students were to stand next to or point to the picture that looks the most like school for them when they were a child? That would be one possibility. We could do that with the pictures. Or we could sort according to different criteria. For example, uniforms, like, sort the pictures where kids are wearing uniforms. Or how about teacher-student roles, or seating, or class environment? What else in the chat? Can you share what else could we categorize those pictures by? There's one thing I don't have on my list. Here, I have these so far. Ages, right? Uh-huh. Did you notice anything about, I'll go back to the pictures. Okay, types of activities. Right. How about gender? There was one of you did note, thinking it was all boys in the class, but actually the ones were for India. Every class when I was in India, I worked in schools there. Almost all the classes were segregated in the schools that I happened to visit. That's not always the case, but they had girls in classes and boys in classes. So that might be something. Levels of tech involved. Nice. Very nice. Okay. All right. So that was our notice and wonder activity. So what stage was that? Anybody in the chat? What was the purpose of those activities with the images? Stage 1, right? Build the field. Build the field. Okay. All right, now we're going to work with our mentor text. Now, the full text is in your participant folder. I'm not going to ask you with the screen here to go in and read the text a lot right now. Don't worry. So I just have this more as a visual aid. But if you'd like to be looking at the full text, it's in your folder. It says Elementary School in the U.S. and Vietnam Mentor Text. All right. So we're going to find some different ways to work with the text, all right? So to really work with the mentor text, the first thing we're going to do is fill in a fact-based comparison chart, okay? Fact-based comparison chart. So now, if anybody does have the text open in front of them, What about starting age in the United States versus Vietnam? What would we write in the chart? Anybody? And I can also swing back to here. I know it's kind of small, 5 or 6. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Again, we're not going to take the time to go through and do these activities together, but so it's a very, very targeted task. And also, and think of it when we think about text evidence, like we want to, when we write about these two countries when we write about two countries and in the mentor text, we have lots of factual information. And so it's helping to highlight what are the facts about these two, from the mentor text about elementary school in these two countries. So length of school day, and then, length of school, meaning the number of years, school day, classroom setup, common subjects, etc. Okay, now, continuing on really working with the text for meaning, take a look at the paragraph, okay? I'm going to give you a second to skim through that, and then invite you to share some similarities and then some differences that you notice, some similarities and differences. And as you see, we're going to then use a Venn diagram to organize that information. So, okay, so Nick, you've already written something similar, is that they start at a similar age, right? Mm-hmm. What other similarities do you see? Okay, like a 6-hour day, similar starting age. Okay, and then one of the differences is they have what's called moral education. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. Most of the subjects are the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm seeing what differences, other differences. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look. I just started to fill in. So they learn some basic subjects. One of the things, and maybe you see if you agree, what was really interesting was to confirm, I think I knew this and I was struck by it, but they have legislation now in Vietnam where it is required to learn a foreign language. Mostly it's English, some French, some Russian, mostly English. And then in the United States, here's the funny thing too, is that I thought, oh, I bet we only have music and physical education regularly in the States and not in Vietnam. But actually, music and physical education are part of the national curriculum required in Vietnam. So we could just say, we could put those in the middle as kids have music and physical education. It's a really, see what you think. I mean, in the United States, it's maybe. In Vietnam, it's actually required. So that would be your call. Okay. All right. Yeah. See, the thing is, it's interesting because I've been to Vietnam now like 3 times, and I sort of assumed that it was much, much more common in the States. And I think it's only really in elementary school in Vietnam is sort of required as part of the curriculum, not in later grades, but like here. So anyway, so now we've worked with the text. What stage was this? Anybody? Yeah, stage 2, right? We're reading the text for meaning. Next, we're going to deconstruct the text. Remember, that is highlighting the language features, see what we notice. So for this one, very similar to last time, highlight the verbs that are used to describe the educational system, okay? And I'm going to ask you why. So what verb tense do we see in our essay, in our sample essay? And I didn't finish highlighting. I'm sorry. I didn't. Present, simple present, exactly. Why? Why do we use this tense? That's part of this idea of really of systemic functional linguistics, like explaining why is it that we chose to use that particular tense. Given truths, right? Right? Or another, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think of given truths as being a little bit more, maybe a little more universal, but routines, maybe it's like routines, right? Yeah, we use it. So we definitely use it for truths. Absolutely, Karen. And like that could be things like science facts, things like the sun rises in the east or something like that. And then, or rice grows a lot in Vietnam. And then this is maybe more like the daily routines. Thank you. Okay. All right. Underline phrases used to show similarities. Circle phrases used to show differences. So we have is similar to in both countries. Those are all ways to show the similarities, right? And then it's for showing differences, we have but or whereas, right? So in Vietnam, children have moral education as well, all right? Since 2020, students also take a foreign language starting in grade 3 in Vietnam, whereas in the US, kids sometimes learn foreign languages at the elementary level. Okay, all right. So we've done our deconstruction. Of course, there's other things you could do, but this is just an example, right? Okay, joint construction. Now we'd go back and give learners information about two other countries that we looked at. So you would provide learners with information about Guatemala and India, or it could be two countries of groups in your class from, comparing, Mexico to Ecuador, or comparing, right? It's really, up to you to choose what two countries. But you would use that same chart that we saw earlier. So we keep seeing that same organizational tool. We keep saying that same scaffold, which is really it's a great kind of repetition without being repetitive or boring or redundant, because the information is new each time. And that's our joint construction. And then for individual construction, and then with that joint construction, then we could write as a class, we'd co-construct that sample paragraph together, similar to what we saw for Vietnam and the United States. And then individual would be to think about your home country, if this was an ESL class, or if it's with GED students thinking about a different country and the US. And for that, they would go do some research, right? They could go do research about the two different places. They could just choose, they could do elementary school, maybe they could choose to do middle school, they could do high school. So give them some choice based on their own personal interests. And with this information they've gathered, now they're going to use a paragraph frame to write a very short essay. Or not, you can choose. If you have varying levels in your class, maybe some students just get some sentence starters. Maybe some students don't even get that. Maybe you know that they're going to be able to mirror the mentor text quite independently, right? Or for those who really need the supports, you could provide the full paragraph frame. I don't know if you know the Graf and Berkenstein book, They Say, I Say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing. It's in its 6th edition now, and they provide you with lots and lots of different essay frames. Yeah, you love that book. I see some comments here in the chat, right? Okay, so let's say, there's some questions that have come in here. So when you do a joint construction, are you writing a similar paragraph to the one model, yes, absolutely. So it's similar to the mentor text, okay? It doesn't have to be identical, but it's trying to use some of those same, like the same verb tense that we highlighted, some of the same constructions for showing similarity and difference. That said, if learners offer something that's not something you specifically presented, that's great, that's fine. And you can also sort of reformulate if they're having struggles in finding the right words during the joint construction, right? I'm just seeing any other comments or no, any other questions, okay. And what was the name of the book? Oh, the book is called, it's on the slide, They Say, I Say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing, okay. Yeah, and Diana says she would use the paragraph frame for joint and individual construction. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, yeah, great. All right, let's see. So I'm looking at another question. Do you find it better to provide a few options during individual? Absolutely. Actually, you're going to see when you look at the list of possibilities when you go into your final breakout room, you could do any combination of those. Like you could assign slightly different tasks to different students, give them different options. 100% absolutely. Yes. Okay. So yes, Anthony, to your question. All right. Any other questions about this sample before we go to the next one? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. So when we go before the end, I'm going to show you that handout. And on that, I kind of list the different activity types. Remember what I said earlier, but it's that I hope you're seeing things that are highly transferable. So, I'm not suggesting that you would only do it the way I'm showing you. I'm just showing you for that text type, here's a possible sequence, and then you could expand it or bring the level down according to your learners, or choose one of the many sample activity types that we'll wrap up with here before we do our breakout room. Okay. All right, now, so far we did a biography, we're doing a comparative essay, which again, this could be much, much longer for higher level students or for a GED class where students have to write a comparative essay. It could be much more complex. And now we're going to do something very functional, okay? So, which is to write emails, writing a formal email to an employer or teacher. Because truth be told, the teaching and learning cycle as presented in Australia was really focused on academic writing in secondary schools, like in English language arts settings. And so I want to show you that it works equally well for these more functional types of texts that students need to craft. Okay, so to build the field, we're going to think about, okay, so who do you send messages to? And just, you can go ahead and answer these. I think it's fun to have the interaction with you all and get a few answers. Who do you send messages to? And you could be thinking about, do you use text messages, WhatsApp, Facebook? I have gotten you guys, I've been so moved by how many WhatsApp messages I've gotten from friends and family around the world over the last 2 weeks. And I had my friend from France applaud Minnesota. You make the U.S. so proud. It was so lovely. I've been getting texts from my cousins, and one's in Alaska, and one's in Seattle. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. And now, so the last option here, we say email. So when do you need to email instead of text? I mean, when is that a necessity that you really should email and not just send a text? Okay, something more professional for work, right? Good, nice, right? If you have to attach a document, okay, good. Maybe older relatives, sure, absolutely. Yes, okay, right, because you're absolutely right. Let's just compare, for example, with a text. Hi, Maria, I can't come today, sorry. Okay, versus, hello, Maria, I'm writing to let you know that I can't come to class today because I'm sick. Thank you, Anna. So what is our difference here? What do we see? What's the difference? What are some key differences? Tone, right? Exactly. Mostly the tone, brevity, right? Formality, absolutely. Exactly. Okay. All right. So this was our way of sort of building the field. All right. Now, for working with the mentor test, I've combined the two for the email. Okay. I've combined the two because the actual deconstructing is kind of what helps us get at the meaning of an email, I would say, see if you agree. But working with mentor text or text, in fact, I'm thinking you could give students 2 or 3 sample emails and have these labels. Now, I said on the board or projected, or they could be on flashcards if you're face-to-face and you're sitting at tables, but have labels, for example, excuse me, subject, greeting, reason for writing, details, closing, name. Those are the labels. And then provide the learners with sample emails and ask them to label the different sections. Or they could mark it up with different colors, use highlighters. There are many ways. But the first thing is to draw their attention to the different components, things that are included in an email. Okay? So, and then we're going to see what we notice about other factors. See if we can get them to notice what makes it formal versus informal. So what words do we see at the beginning? Do we use hi or hello? And then talk about, well, when might one be okay? When do we use I want versus I'm writing to? This is just a suggestion of what you could do. Obviously, what you do will depend on the email samples that you decide to use, depending on the level of your learners, depending on the content, the context that you choose for your students. Okay. Next, for joint construction, here, I've talked about providing sentence frames, but in this example, we're going to build a shared word bank. So with the students, we'll first create a word bank or a bank of phrases. So what are our possible greetings? Hello, dear, hi, or what are ways to express reasons? For example, I'm writing to, I would like to ask, I need help with. What are possible closings? Okay, so then we would leave those posted as the class collectively with you composes in real time. What would be lovely is if you are in a class with technology and you projected a blank email, right? And you could construct it together, put in the subject, put in the to, and just maybe send it to yourself or send it to a student. But they get to choose the topic as a class, and this could be chosen based on their, their interests, their needs, who they are as a group. So we're going to either write a parent emailing a teacher or a student emailing the office, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So again, some little differences here is this idea of constructing the word bank together. And you could do that for any type of joint construction, right? And then choice of topics. Individual construction, we're going to give them the same options. Choose one of those, okay? And then consider, is this formal or less formal? What do we have to include? And this is a new idea. Before they actually write the full email, have them say their email to a partner using some sentence starters, because we know the bridge from oral language and oral rehearsal to writing is really, really profound. And have their partner listen. Who's the email for and why? And then have them craft their email. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a moment. We'll come back to them in a second here. All right. And well, actually, before that, let's see if there are any questions about this particular sample, the sample 3, the email sample, before we
I'm not
move
seeing
on.
anything in the chat, Beth.
No, I don't either. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and share a different document here. Okay. Come on, I got to get that to close. Oh, okay, just give me a second. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So you're going to find this in your folder. Is that large enough, Patsy?
Yeah, we can see that.
Good. Perfect. Okay. So these are different activity options, and many of them were adapted from, in fact, I'm going to actually put that report in your folder, actually. It's called Scaffolding Writing with the Teaching and Learning Cycle for Students Grades 6 to 12. So many of these were from there, but really kind of tweaked a bit for adult ed. Also, I often offer recommendation for how to do the activity in an online class. But what you'll see here, and you'll get to kind of scroll through this, get in some inspirations, all sorts of different things we might do. So for building the field, we could use the KCL chart, we could do the lineup I talked about. We could do the images. Now, I did the notice and wonder with just showing you things on the screen. That could be a gallery walk, sorting images. You could have student-led discussions where you give them some prompts that lead into the topic for the lesson. You could do think, write, share. So show the students an image or even show a short video clip and have them react to that, and then write some notes and then turn and talk with others. But I'm sure in your breakout rooms, you might think of other things you do and have done that serve this purpose of building the field. Okay, then we have working with your mentor text for meaning. So things like paired reading. Students take turns reading and use a structured note taker like you've seen, like reading and filling in a graphic organizer, and other supportive methods, but having them do it with a partner, okay? They take turns reading it together. Or teacher, we already saw this teacher-led read alouds. That was one that I shared with you, where you practice showing them what fluent reading looks like. You pause, you ask questions, and this could also be used for deconstructing the text. Or jigsaw, we saw that earlier. This one is nice, collaborative summarizing. The students collaboratively construct in pairs a summary statement of a short section of the text in order to distill the most critical information. Okay, I'm not going to read all of them out loud to you, but you see that there are many, many different types of activities you could do for each stage. So deconstructing, we've seen many of these. Now, I had read and fill in a graphic organizer for the reading for meaning, but it can also be used for deconstructing the structure of a text. For example, if you have students reading a biography, and if they fill in a timeline, the timeline helps to show them that this is a chronology, okay? Collaborative text reconstruction. I love this one. It's kind of like the old dicto comp, if you remember that. The teacher reads a portion of a mentor text, not too much at a time, but they read it several times as students listen and take notes to capture the key words and phrases. And then they work together to reconstruct it as closely as possible as they can to the text, but really looking at what language did they have and what did they struggle with? What does it reveal about what the students need more work on noticing, or you need to draw your attention to in terms of the text structure? That's what that one's about. You could use a version of that for really understanding the meaning of the text, but the attempt here is to kind of see what they can do with language and if they can reconstruct it. Doing different like paragraph or whole text jumbles, because as you put text back together, you have to recognize what were the different moves, what language was used, what are the transitions, and how does that help me see the order of information, either at the text or sentence level. And then we saw a lot of this reading and marking up the text. A lot of ideas for joint construction that we saw today, and others that building a shared word bank, whole class co-writing, sentence by sentence building, where the teacher elicits, like, how should we start? What would be next? Okay. Kind of fill in the gap co-construction, where you do give them partial texts or, paragraph frames, and then what comes next with pauses. Again, you can kind of take a closer look. And then finally, a lot of different ways that you can prompt the individual construction, some of which we saw using the paragraph frames, giving them some visual support like anchor charts, models, word banks, some sentence starters or sentence frames, giving them some time for planning, right? So like before they start to write, have them organize their ideas. Do you remember I said with the Rosa Parks one, I shared a graphic organizer for reading and filling that in. They could use that same graphic organizer then to plan for their own writing. And then guided self-talk, where students use written self-questions like, what is my purpose? Who will read this? Is my main idea clear? Kind of reflect on and build some metacognition. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I just wanted to give you kind of a menu of options, okay? So back to my slides, you're going to have a chance now to do some application time with partners. Okay. All right. PowerPoint. Okay, go back a couple slides. Okay. So now, here's what I would like you to do for your breakout room time. Think about a writing task that you already do. Here, let me turn off the closed captions. Think of a writing task that you currently do, that you currently assign to students, or it's part of your curriculum. So start with that, and then think about, well, how have I already applied any of the 5 stages of the teaching and learning cycle? Okay, so again, I'm not assuming that all of this is new for you. What I do gather from our chat and from comments I'm getting from you is that you're seeing a nice way to pull all of that together and in a very systematic way, scaffold and build up to creating texts at any variety of levels, from beginning all the way through very advanced. And I gave you some sentence frames, some sentence starters for yourself. So what are you inspired to add? For example, when I'm working when working on writing, fill in the blank. What? You decide. This could be whatever you're teaching. We could build a field by okay, so how about when working on writing blank, we could deconstruct a mentor text by, okay? And then when working on writing with blank, we could blank for joint construction of the text. Oops, I'm sorry, that last bit was just a leftover when I copied. Excuse me. Forgive me. Okay, so that shouldn't be there. So Patsy, if you copy and paste this into the chat, get rid of that last, a mentor text by. That's just extra. So you have 10 minutes again with your teams. We see you're actually, yeah, I'll do 10 because I want to have time for closing. Sorry. 10 minutes with your teams to think about, what could you add to what you're already doing? What are you inspired to try? And see if those sentence frames give you some help with that. So before I Patsy, do you want me to put those in the chat again, the
No,
prompts, or
I
did you
think I've got it. And
got those?
then I will drop the participant folder. Anything in particular you want them to look at in the participant
Well,
folder?
so for this one, you know what I would say, thank you for the reminder. If you're forgetting, like, what did we do again? What did we do? You can circle back and peek at the 3 sample lessons. But I think right now, what might be more helpful is then to look at the document that says activity options, the teaching and learning activity options, the one I just shared with you with the blue headers. That might be the most useful, just to kind of give you this whole menu of possibilities. And most of which, things that we did today are included on that list. Does that work for everybody? Does that sound good?
Yeah, let me just put
Is
that
that
in the
clear?
chat.
Just make sure that was
And
clear.
I will go ahead and create those groups.
Thank you.
And 10 minutes, I'm ready when you are. Are we good to go?
Are we good? All right. Patsy, I'm not going to do the timer. I just don't want to mess with that. It's
No, no, that was
10:40,
for break anyway.
11:50. It's 11:40. We'll be back at 11:50.
Yeah, the break rooms will
Yeah.
time it on
Oh,
their
that's
own,
right.
so
Of
we're
course.
good.
What am I saying? I'm sorry. Yeah. I saw Vicky. Okay.
All
All right.
right, go
Just
ahead.
going back to the slide with the prompt. So if you want, you can use the language frames, like when working on blank. Let's do a couple report outs. What was an inspiration? And again, raise your hand or just open your mic when you're ready. Mara, go ahead.
We kind of had a roundabout conversation, a really rich conversation, but where we kind of ended was how helpful this process would be in working with writers who are becoming really reliant on AI, of making
Oh,
sure that they are really understanding and able to like understand how what they write is connected to the text, but then
yeah,
also really understanding that importance of that tone of like, we want to be able to use those conventions that we're relying on AI for at times, but this
yeah.
allows you to understand why that looks professional, why it looks
Mm-hmm,
valuable, why it's going to
mm-hmm.
earn you that credibility in your
Yeah,
writing
yeah,
without just kind of having it feel disjointed from you as a person and your own thoughts. So
yeah.
we just thought that was a really helpful connection in dealing with not trying to block people from using AI, but
Right.
also really not becoming overly reliant on not understanding and just submitting.
Thank you. That's a great inspiration. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Nick, you're the next hand up.
All right, our group really focused on wanting a good mentor text at
Uh-huh.
the outset. And we talked about
Mhm,
different ways to find strong mentor texts, ways to level down mentor texts for low
mhm,
levels if it's too
mhm,
complex,
mhm.
and really having that strong thing.
Yeah. Well,
Elena had a thought that she didn't get to finish. Elena, would you like to finish it now?
Yeah, as far as AI is concerned, I think I personally use it for advanced students. Okay,
uh-huh.
that's in my undergraduate teaching class. In
Mhm,
my immigrant ESOL classes, uh, I will be very skeptical on using AI because they will copy and they really
mhm,
are not mature yet. I mean, well,
mhm,
in age
mhm,
they are, but as
mhm,
far as learning the English language that
mhm,
we are working
mhm,
on, for them to
mhm,
write, I will not recommend it. For academic
mhm,
purposes, absolutely.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I'm just learning so much as I go along, and I know there have been some great workshops. Keep your eyes open for those ideas on how to use AI, ethical ways to use AI, helpful ways to use AI. But I have to tell you, and I meant, well, I didn't end up putting written with Chat GPT, but I used Chat GPT. I did some research on Vietnam and the US. I drafted my mentor text using AI, using Chat GPT. And I ended up changing a lot. And then my colleague out in Massachusetts, Laura Porter, we've presented together quite a bit. She teaches there. She uses AI or Chat GPT or there are other sources now to create her mentor texts. And I think that's a great, so us as teachers. So how many of you have used AI to help you create these materials, right? I think that's a very good use. It's a time saver, and especially if you do the due diligence of actually doing the research. Like I didn't just like say write an essay about Vietnam and the U.S. and then trust anything. No, I didn't do that. I did some. I looked because I'd been to Vietnam. I looked at the Ministry of Education page, and I made sure I was fairly certain that my data was accurate. Right, my facts were true. Right. Good. Good. Other questions? Because I waved that thing where you wave and then your hand goes up. I've got to get rid of my hand. Anyway. Yeah, Betsy, no, Betsy, I can get rid of Betsy. Laura. Yeah. Hi, Laura. You had a question. Thank you. Or a comment, I mean.
Well, because we got to talking about AI too, and so I got to thinking about this isn't something that I've done, but something that I could possibly do is have students give students a prompt and then have them put it into ChatGPT or another AI program, see what comes back, and then have them work together or work alone, maybe starting out working together on, okay, what words, what vocabulary are in this ChatGPT piece that I don't even know. So first of all, identifying vocabulary that maybe you wouldn't use because you don't know it. And
Absolutely.
also looking at it in terms of how could I use this, like you were saying, you used it as an outline, but now how do I put my voice? How do I put my tone? How do I give it me? How do I put myself into this? And how do I check for facts and everything? So you can use it as, I was thinking, like even as like your rough draft and your first draft. And now revise it and really work on it. But I think for some students, they rely on it as a crutch to get them started, but then they don't move beyond what they first get. They just okay, what I get first is what I get.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, use it as a starting point, but then move beyond it.
Yeah.
And make it your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Elizabeth, you wrote here, I'm an AI pragmatist. I got to learn about it because it's here, whether we like it or not. And that's how I'm feeling. And I feel like I'm learning new things every day. And we've already, shared some inspirations here that are really, really helpful. Well, let's just close with it. I think we still have a couple minutes, just a couple minutes. We've had questions throughout. I'm glad we've had time for questions throughout. Just we'll close with just let you know, I do have references here on the last page of the slides. I did share the slides in my folder already, but we just have a couple more minutes for any other questions or closing comments. And feel free to raise your hand or just open your mic and start talking. Anybody?
Hey, Betsy.
Yeah,
This is
Laura.
Laura. Yeah. In the group where we were meeting, there were a lot of great connections to the steps in what we're already doing.
Yeah.
We observed how helpful it is to look at this whole structure, the system itself, and how powerful it is to be aware of how all those steps fit together in that research-based way to help our students become independent writers if we do it consistently. So we really appreciated the whole systematic framework you shared.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. That means the world to me. I'm really grateful for you sharing that. Okay, well, I think we are out of time. I know you want to have time for a break. Patsy might have some closing remarks, but I can't thank you all enough. You participated so actively. Patsy, I know you'll probably, as the owner of this meeting, if you get the chat record, I'd love to hang on to that. It's really great to hear your inspirations.
Absolutely. Well,
your
if you'll just
comments.
join me and find those reaction buttons and thank Betsy for us. We'll really appreciate her time and expertise this morning. It's so great to have you with us, Betsy.
Oh, thank you.
And
I'm seeing all your kind messages in the chat.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna remind people that the next session begins at 12:45, so you have a 45-minute break. I wish I had a yummy buffet for you all, but you're on your own. But we'll see you back at 12:45. There's a range of sessions to go to. I've dropped the flyer. If that flyer gets too high traffic, it can be clunky. There's a copy of it right under that. There's any number of things to choose from. including one from me and Rob if you're interested in some basic ESL stuff and a whole bunch of other things. So we're really glad to offer this little break here and then a whole afternoon of more good stuff. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to close the recording.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. And I'm going to try to pop into some things over the next couple of days. We're in the middle of a search for a new faculty member and I'm chairing it. So I'm a little bit stretched at the moment, but I'm going to try to pop into a few things. But otherwise, I know I'll see many of you frequently in the days and months and weeks to come.